Tilsit, East Prussia, October 1941. A low metallic fog clung to the Neman River as Elias Brandt stepped off the back of the requisitioned truck, boots sinking into the wet soil. Dawn hadn't it yet broken. The world was a smear of gray silhouettes, warehouses, a burned-out farmhouse, fields churned by weeks of military traffic. The cold stung his face with a bitterness that reminded him of Berlin winters, except there was nothing civilized about the air here. This was the edge of the world, the frontier where orders came stripped of all subtlety. Elias had been here only 3 weeks, assigned as an intelligence liaison at least. That was the official language. In truth, he had been absorbed into a machine he did not fully recognize, one that operated in shadows, behind fences, in buildings without names. His task today was described simply as observation and document verification. He already hated that phrase. Ahead, a temporary holding area was lit by 2 dim lamps hooked to a generator. A line of civilians, Lithuanian and Polish mostly, stood silently under the watch of SS auxiliaries. Some had luggage, some carried nothing. All wore the faint, exhausted expression of people who no longer knew when their luck had run out. When Elias approached, an SS Unterscharführer snapped to attention. "Herr Brandt, we have the list ready." His voice held forced respect. Elias's intelligence rank sounded more powerful than it truly was. Still, it bought him room to maneuver, a privilege he never recalled asking for. He accepted the clipboard, but didn't immediately look at it. His eyes drifted across the field instead, drawn to a girl in a threadbare coat, clutching a wooden doll, maybe 6 years old, blonde hair, pale face. Her mother kept a trembling hand on her shoulder. Beside them, a man-father, perhaps, stood tall, jaw tight, refusing to show fear even as his shoulders betrayed him. Elias looked away. "What exactly am I verifying?" he asked. The SS man hesitated, then gestured toward a nearby barn. "Transit records. Some will be moved east, some not. Orders from Königsberg. They want everything properly logged." Properly logged. Another phrase he had come to despise. Inside the barn, the stench hit first oil, damp hay, and the faint, sour smell of too many people confined in too little space. A makeshift desk had been set up against a support beam. Folders, stamps, forms. Elias sat down and forced his breathing to steady. He opened the first file. A family of 3. No crimes listed, no affiliations. Ethnic markers circled in red ink. He flipped to the next. An elderly man, a shoemaker, another red circle. No justification given. The pattern repeated. He closed the folder slowly. Outside, the tractor engine growled to life, followed by shouts, orders being barked. Elias felt something coil in his stomach. He stood abruptly. "I need to observe," he said. The SS man nodded, almost relieved to have someone else witness the process. They stepped back outside. The family with the little girl had reached the front of the line. Papers were inspected, questions asked. The mother-S voice trembled. The father-S remained steady, but carried the sound of a man negotiating with fate. The little girl clutched her doll harder. After a moment, the auxiliary soldier shook his head and pointed right toward the trucks, not the wagons. The father protested. A rifle butt silenced him. Elias stepped forward before he could stop himself. "That family is listed for transit," he said, voice sharper than intended. The SS man blinked, confused. Which list? Elias held up the clipboard as if it were a shield. "Intelligence registry. They are pending review." He didn't know why he said it. Maybe because the girl's eyes had locked on his. Maybe because he suddenly remembered his own sister, dead since 36, taken by pneumonia that no one could delay. Maybe because he still clung to some naive idea that he could slow the darkness swallowing everything. The SS man hesitated. Behind him, another officer approached, irritated. "What's the hold-up?" "Intelligence review," Elias repeated, firmer now. The officer frowned but didn't counter. Intelligence outranked logistics, at least on paper. Finally, he waved the auxiliaries off. Fine. Move them to secondary holding. The family was redirected. The father looked at Elias as they passed, not grateful, not relieved, just bewildered. The mother whispered something Elias couldn't hear. The little girl gave him smallest nod, as if acknowledging a pact he never agreed to. As they walked away, the irritated officer leaned close. "Brandt, your department plays games I don't understand, but let me be clear, this place has its own rules, and men who don't follow those rules tend to disappear." Elias met his gaze. "I am here to document. That's all." The officer smiled coldly. "Everyone says that, at first." The generator sputtered. The fog thickened. Somewhere in the distance a single gunshot broke the silence. Elias didn't flinch. He forced himself not to, but the sound rippled through him like a slow, icy blade. He walked back to the barn, closed the door, and leaned both hands on the desk until the tremor in his pulse calmed. He knew then, with sick certainty, that the war he imagined when he volunteered was not the war happening around him, and he knew that this assignment, East Prussia, these lists, these verifications, was not temporary. It was a doorway, and he had just stepped through it. Outside, the fog swallowed everything again, and Elias Brandt realized he had begun crossing a line he could never uncross. Königsberg Headquarters, East Prussia, November 1941. Snow drifted past the windows in slow, deliberate spirals, the kind that looked peaceful from a warm office but carried a brutal sharpness outdoors. Elias Brandt stood in a narrow hallway lined with wartime maps and bulletin boards, waiting for a summons he had not expected. His coat was still damp from the cold. His gloves dripped melted snow onto the polished floor. He had been pulled off field duty for evaluation, though no one had clarified whether that meant promotion, reprimand, or something more ominous. A door clicked open. Brandt. Inside. The voice belonged to Oberst Richter, a man with a face carved from stone and a gaze that measured every movement like a chess calculation. Elias stepped into the office. The warmth inside hit him first. The clutter, second files stacked in precarious towers, radio logs, coded dispatches, a half-finished map of the Baltics pinned to a board. Richter motioned for him to sit, but did not do the same. Instead, he circled the room like a man testing the air for smoke. "We've received reports from Tilsit," he began. "Your reports differ from theirs." Elias kept his expression neutral. "In what way, sir?" Richter pulled a folder from his desk and flipped it open. "You classified multiple families for intelligence review, delaying their transport." His voice was calm, but something in it carried the weight of a trap. "I acted under Protocol 7B, Elias replied. "Unclear background, potential resistance ties, inconsistent documentation." Richter snapped the folder shut. "Don't insult me, Brandt." Silence settled like dust. The Oberst stepped behind his desk and looked at Elias with an expression halfway between curiosity and warning. "You're an unusual case," he said. "A linguist who becomes an analyst. an analyst who volunteers for field duty, and now a field officer who interferes with SS processes. His fingers tapped the folder. Why? Elias's pulse quickened, but he kept his voice steady. "I follow directives, sir, including the ones that say we gather information before making irreversible decisions." "Is that how you frame it?" Richter asked quietly. "Irreversible decisions?" Before Elias could respond, Richter slid another file across the desk, this one thinner, darker, with a black stripe across the cover. "This is a transfer order," he said. "Effective immediately, you are reassigned to a special detachment operating near Riga. Intelligence oversight, counter-resistance coordination, logistical auditing." "Why me?" Elias asked. Richter allowed himself the faintest smile. "Because someone noticed you asked the right questions, the kind most officers never think to ask." Elias couldn't tell if that was praise or condemnation. Richter leaned closer. "There is something happening in the East, Brandt. Something our division needs eyes on. Men who see, not blindly obey." He paused. "But be careful. Men who see too much rarely finish the war in one piece." The meeting ended abruptly. Elias was dismissed with 2 documents, transfer papers and a sealed envelope bearing the insignia of the Reich Main Security Office. No instructions, no summary, just an address in Riga and a departure time. As he walked out of headquarters, the snow had thickened, falling in heavy sheets that blurred the city into shapes and shadows. His breath fogged the air, and the cold bit through his coat, but something else gnawed at him, a sense that he was stepping into deeper waters, the kind where the bottom was too dark to see. He boarded the transport train hours later. Inside, soldiers played cards, clerks scribbled reports, and officers argued over logistics. Ordinary war noise. And yet Elias felt none of it belonged to him anymore. He sat alone at the end of the carriage, watching the frozen landscape crawl by abandoned farmhouses, silent forests, bridges crusted with ice. His mind drifted back to the little girl in Tilsit, her wooden doll, the father's unyielding stare. He wondered where they were now, if they had survived the review, if his intervention had bought them more than a few extra days. The thought twisted something inside him. Night fell early. By the time the train crossed into the Latvian border zone, the sky was a single sheet of black, broken occasionally by moonlit snowfields. Elias pulled out the sealed envelope and turned it over. No name, no emblem, only a wax seal pressed into thick paper. He hesitated. Then he broke it open. Inside was a simple message typed on thin gray cardstock. "Observe everything. Report nothing that cannot be undone." Below the words, a single initial, R. Richter. The train rattled onward. Elias stared at the message until the ink seemed to blur. For the first time, he understood. He wasn't being punished or promoted. He was being tested. Outside, the snowstorm swallowed the tracks behind them, erasing every trace of where they had come from. And Elias Brandt felt the unmistakable shiver of a man who had just crossed into a darker chapter of the war. Riga outskirts, December 1941. The air was metallic, sharp enough to sting the lungs. Elias Brandt stepped off the transport truck and into a world that smelled of diesel, wet earth, and something faintly chemical, drifting on the wind. The facility before him, his new assignment, did not appear on any standard map. It was simply marked in the transfer orders as Logistical Depot 12L. Barbed wire traced its perimeter. Guard towers rose every 50 meters, their searchlights sweeping across the snow-covered ground. Soldiers in thick winter coats marched in precise intervals, their boots crunching rhythmically on the frozen gravel. A clerk with frost-bitten fingertips approached him. "Brandt? Intelligence Detachment?" Elias nodded. "You were late," the clerk muttered. "Follow me." The inside of the depot was a maze of warehouses, supply sheds, and radio stations, all connected by narrow lanes packed with crates. Men moved like mechanical parts in a machine, carrying ammunition boxes, repairing trucks, stamping documents, checking manifests. It looked like any other military logistical hub, but something felt wrong. There was an underlying tension, a quiet that didn't belong in a place so busy. The soldiers avoided certain buildings. Officers exited others with expressions they quickly smoothed over when anyone approached. And in the distance, beyond the fog of cold breath and exhaust fumes, Elias thought he heard shouting. Then silence. He followed the clerk into a low administrative building where the walls were lined with maps of the Eastern Front and columns of captured materials. A man waited inside. Hauptmann Victor Holland, tall, impeccably groomed, with a cold surgical calm in his eyes. Holland studied Elias as if examining a specimen. "So," he said, "Richter sent you." Elias stood at attention. "I was told my duties concern intelligence oversight and logistics coordination." Hallen's smile was thin. "Coordination is a generous term. What we do here requires accuracy, precision." Silence. He paused. "And someone who understands when not to ask unnecessary questions." Elias recognized the warning. "I understand my responsibilities," he replied. Hallen leaned back in his chair. "Good. You will begin by auditing Warehouse Block C. You will verify manifests, review confiscated materials, and document all anomalies. But you will not under any circumstances engage with Section 4. Elias waited for clarification, but none came. "Report to me at 1900, Hallen said. "Dismissed." Outside, a cold wind whipped through the depot, carrying the distant creak of metal doors. Elias pulled his collar up and made his way to Warehouse Block C. A sergeant unlocked the heavy sliding doors. Inside, the warehouse was a cavern of stacked crates, machinery parts, confiscated tools, broken radios, civilian belongings marked with property tags, watches, books, instruments, coats. Not unusual, yet not entirely ordinary either. As Elias walked through the aisles, clipboard in hand, he found the first anomaly. A crate labeled "Agricultural Tools," confiscated, contained no tools. Instead, it held sealed vials and glass cylinders packed in straw, each stamped with a tiny eagle insignia. Laboratory equipment, not local. The next crate was stranger. Marked medical supplies, it contained files, thick stacks of documents listing names, birthplaces, occupational skills, and coded annotations Elias didn't recognize. Some pages had small red triangles, others had blue circles. A pattern emerged, though he couldn't yet read it. He scribbled neutral descriptions in his audit log. Nothing that would expose what he truly saw. Richter S. warning echoed in his memory. Report nothing that cannot be undone. As he worked deeper into the warehouse, Elias noticed a door in the far wall unmarked, steel reinforced. A lock hung from it, but it was old, rusted, as if almost never touched. A noise sounded behind him. "Sir?" A young private stood in the aisle, pale and nervous. "Yes? You're needed in Section 4. The soldier swallowed hard. Hauptmann Hallen S. orders. Elias S. pulse tightened. "I was told Section 4 is restricted." "It is," the private whispered, "but he wants you there." The private led him across the depot, passing lines of barbed wire and heavy floodlights. They approached a set of thick concrete structures unlike the warehouse's bunkers, with reinforced doors and narrow ventilation slats. The shouting he'd heard earlier returned, faint but unmistakable. It wasn't the sound of soldiers. The private stopped short. "I can go further," he said. "Only officers." Elias stepped forward alone. A guard unlocked the reinforced door. Inside, the air changed heavier, hotter, laced with disinfectant and something else. The corridor was dimly lit. He heard boots. Then Hallen emerged from a side room. "Brandt," Hallen said calmly, "you're here to witness." "Witness what?" Elias asked. Hallen motioned him forward. "A process, a necessary component of maintaining order in occupied territory." They walked past rooms sealed with metal doors. From one, Elias heard coughing, ragged, violent. From another, muffled voices. Hallen showed no reaction as they passed them. At the end of the corridor, they entered a chamber where officers stood around a table covered with files and stamps. A man in a Medic S uniform wrote notes with a shaking hand. Another reviewed lists of names with cold efficiency. "This is administrative," Hallen said. "Logistics, classification." Elias scanned the papers. They were the same types he'd seen in the crates lists of individuals, coded markings beside each name. Blue circles, red triangles. Hallen spoke quietly. "The front advances. Resistance grows. We must separate the useful from the dangerous, the compliant from the subversive. It is all part of the war effort." Elias kept his expression still, but inside, a cold realization formed. The codes were not inventory classifications. They were human categories. The officers stamped papers, more names, more symbols. Each decision sent someone toward life, forced labor, or something far worse. Elias swallowed hard. His voice was steady only because he forced it to be. "What exactly do you require from me?" Hallen handed him a file. "The Eastern Territories are vast. We process thousands. We need accuracy. You will refine the intelligence criteria, spot inconsistencies, assess risk profiles." Elias opened the file. Faces, names, ages, villages, notes like family history uncertain or language skills useful or background suspect, all distilled into a decision. Hallen placed a hand on his shoulder. "You are here because Richter trusts your judgment. Don T. disappoint him, and Don T.O. pretend you can stand above the war. No one does." The officers continued stamping. The muffled voices behind the sealed doors grew faint. Elias felt suddenly weightless, as if standing between two worlds, one where he could still claim ignorance, and another where that illusion was gone forever. He closed the file, and in that moment he understood something with complete clarity. Whatever this depot was, it wasn't about supplies. It was about people. And the war he thought he had understood was entering a far darker phase, one in which he was now deeply, dangerously entangled.